Hello everybody, Quadrajet Power here, going to do a disassembly for our level 1 rebuild on this 72 Pontiac Quadrajet. You can see it's pretty dirty. I'm going to just go through the complete disassembly process that we do, show you what all's gone through, how we measure everything, the components you should measure, what should be thrown away, what needs to be cleaned. So we'll get started. First I'm going to use the punch and tap the roll pin back so we can get the accelerator pump arm off. Remove it from there. So it's going to go into the cleaning basket. Typically come over and remove the choke components. Try to remove everything off the outside of the carburetor first. This one was missing the pull off and the rod, so we'll have to get those before we reassemble. All that goes into the cleaning. This has the secondary lockout on the air horn. I like to remove that. Typically we'll discard these. This prevents the secondaries from opening if the choke's active. This is a level 1 build, correct for the original car, so we'll reinstall that after it's cleaned. This one's not going to get plating. Remove the clip from the choke rod, choke actuator rod. Should be an actuator down in there, it didn't come out. Discard the clip, because we always replace those. Remove the secondary hanger. Secondary hanger has a letter on it. There, this one is a K. Rods have a stamp on them. These are DAs. We make notes every carburetor we do, so we know exactly what it has with it originally. We also know what the original carburetors came with, so we'll do that comparison before we do the rebuild. Now I'm going to remove all the hold down screws. A magnet to get these out of the primary side. You can see there's a set of screws removed from the early top. I'm going to pull off this. This is the Pontiac vent. Got a gasket underneath there, so we'll discard that. All this going into the cleaning bin. You can see under the air horn on this one has a primary pullover enrichment, secondary pullover enrichment as well. A lot of Quadrajets do not have the primary pullover enrichment. Almost all have the secondary pullover enrichment. And these are the vent tubes, the two inner smaller ones. Accelerator pump, that's an interesting, that's an old leather. This will go in the trash. air horn gasket had already been taken off of this one for some reason, so we're going to remove the power piston. So somebody's been in there before. You can see the primary rods are ruined. Primary rods are stamped. And clean that off enough so that we can read the stamp so we know what to go back with. Have to use a magnifying glass. And these don't have a stamp. Must have been a commercial reman. I don't soak these. These primary rods will be thrown away and replaced. We almost always replace primary rods anyway. They get worn, they're brass. We won't soak this, but we'll clean it up later at reassembly. The float cover will be cleaned. Float, we always discard. We always use a new float, so this one will be thrown away. The float pin, always spread these out just a little bit so that make sure the air horns are going to press down on that. That'll go into the soak. The needle for the needle and seat, that'll be discarded. Use a wide blade to get the needle, the seat out. It'll be discarded. There's a small gasket underneath the seat. Make sure you remove that. And you can see the inside here, so and we're going to take out the jets. These are a little bit crusty. This one's had a lot of dirt in it. Looks like some water sat in it for a while. Can't read the jets unless we clean those off and make sure what size they are. We'll record that. 74s. If we don't clean those, we almost always replace those as well. We got the rear diverter. Put that in the soak. And we'll get the choke actuator. Clean that. Check ball screw. Remove that. It'll go into the clean. And we're going to turn it over. I'm going to get out the spring. Check ball didn't come out, but this is the power piston spring. We're going to throw that away. We always replace that in every build we do. Recommend you do the same. I'll take a little sharp point there and get that check ball loose, and it came out. We're going to pull the base plate off. This one has the 2 screws. Came off fine. Throttle body gasket. I'm going to throw that away. well plugs. This one has the idle compensator. We're going to remove that. Actually, it's been blocked and just covered up, which is actually fine. The idle compensator does not, most fail. We're going to put this in the cleaner. Idle compensator can cause erratic idle anyway. So that one's been plugged. So now in the main body, there's several things that we're going to measure. We have the lower idle air bleeds. There's pin rods to measure. That one's 69 thousandths. We're going to measure the main air bleed here. This is the lower main. It also is 69 thousandths on this particular one. This one has the upper idle air bleeds and upper mains both in the air horn itself, so we'll measure those later. Clean off some of this old gasket stuff. Now we're going to measure the idle tubes and the down channel restrictions. These are the down channel restrictions here. Can measure those first. .45 thousandths. Idle tubes are here. There's one on each side. .35 thousandths. Idle tubes, down channel restrictions, idle air bleeds, the ones in the bottom that we measured, and the ones in the air horn, those all affect the idle circuits themselves. Now we're going to take out the idle tubes. And again, this is something that we do in every single build we do. This is going to make it a great video because these are not wanting to participate already. So we get a stubborn idle tube. We take a 3/32 drill bit. It can go a little bit into there. The idle tubes have a collar, and then the tube's inside the collar, so we've got to pull the collar in the tube. Now we take a drywall screw, screw that into that collar, and then we try to remove them. Sometimes they can be very stubborn. So there's the idle tube. We won't soak these when they're correct original size, we'll clean and reuse. We'll resize them. There's a higher compression or performance camshaft or any reason that the engine's producing less vacuum, we need to increase the size of the restriction that's on the bottom to allow more fuel with a lower rate. You can see why we always pull these. They're dirty, tips are clogged. The restriction's at the bottom, so we pull them, and this is where the restriction is at the bottom. If we need to resize, that restriction at the bottom is what has to be resized. This one being commercially remanufactured, the bypass air was blocked. We're going to knock those blocked passages out. Most of these had lead fillers like this, so I'm going to get those out of the way. They will not go back in. We'll calibrate this one correctly for the original so it'll run right. Then now the body's ready to go soak. I'm not taking the other parts off of it because this one's not going to be plated. If it was going to be plated, we'd remove everything that comes off the outside. Now that one's ready to go into the soak. So go to the air horn now. We're going to remove all of the vent tubes. Most of these will come out easily with a little bit of pressure. We don't soak the brass components. We'll clean those separately in a different solution, and we'll use either a brass brush or triple-aught steel wool. We'll remove the nozzles for the secondary side. We remove all of this because we're going to resurface the bottom of the air horn to make sure that it seals good. All air horns have some warp to them. A lot of bodies do as well. Most of them warp together. As long as they seal, a little bit of warpage is fine. We're not worried about that. Trying to get, if you flatten the air horn itself and make sure it's flat, it may not seal to the body because it's if the air horn has been with the body all of its life, then it needs to stay together. Now we're going to measure the upper main air bleeds. This is the upper main air bleed. The hole right there is the upper idle air bleed. So we're going to measure those. The upper main, in this case, is 70 thousandths. And actually, that one fell out. So I have to put that one back in there later. Upper idle bleed. $54 thousandths. So now we're going to grind off the back side of these screws and the choke flap screws so we can remove all of the components there. First we'll go ahead and disassemble this so we can grind everything at the same time. So we got the base plate. We're going to pull off all the components off the outside of it. We know there's a lot of people that build carburetors, a lot of people put kits in carburetors. Not everybody does it the same. We realize that. So if you're looking at this going, it's not how you do it, or it's not how other people do it, that's fine. The end result's what's important. This is the fast idle adjuster. I'm going to remove the air idle adjustment screws. They should come out easy. Sometimes if they've been sitting in water, these will be frozen in there. If they break off on the inside, then we throw it in the scrap pile. So there's a vacuum cap over the rear port. Throw that away. Now we're going to measure the bypass air. There's two things on the base plate here we're going to measure. We're going to measure the hole that's behind the idle screws that come out here. We're going to measure the size of those, and we're going to measure the bypass air size. So with the 108 on a lot of these Pontiac carburetors, they're both 108. Knowing all of the port sizes, all the calibration points, it's critical in setting up a Quadrajet for the application. Quadrajets are application specific from the factory, and then that's also what we do here. So if an engine's modified, if it's got changes to it, anything that's been done to it, we'll alter all the calibration points to make sure that you have good idle, good part throttle, and great performance at wide open throttle. So right now we're going to go grind the back side of the screws here on the primary shaft and on the air horn. So we'll be right back after we do that. Okay, we're back after grinding all the screws. The tips of the screws are staked from the factory. If you try to remove them without grinding them down, they'll break 99% of the time. So they need to be ground first. And then hopefully the screws won't break when we pull them out. So now we'll remove the primary throttle blades. Those will go into the cleaning bin. Throw the screws away. Don't reuse these screws. And just in case you're wondering, yes, quadrajetpower.com has all of the parts that you need for any Quadrajet. Secondary blades will go into the cleaner. Now we'll pull the shafts out on this particular one. They both come out this side, connected together, so the tension spring comes loose. They will both slide out. We'll unhook secondary rod, spring. We'll reuse this spring. So these will all go into the cleaning. Now the base plate's ready to go clean as well. We'll install bushings on the primary side. We always do that, every build that we do. Choke flap screws go in the trash. The choke flap goes into the cleaner. So does the rod. This carburetor has been painted, as well as being dirty from grime and whatever else. Pontiac had the large cutouts on the secondary air valves, part of the pullover enrichment system. This is the pullover enrichment exit hole. We'll measure those as well. Pullover enrichment's like the accelerator pump shot for the secondary system. Main body keeps some gas in the reservoir for the pullover enrichment, so when the secondary is open, as soon as it gets the vacuum signal, it'll pull through the tubes through the air horn and feed the secondary, so it gives it a shot of fuel to richen the initial burst before the boosters start pulling fuel. So if you have a bog, check those tubes, make sure they're still in place and that they're working. That'll go into the cleaner, throw the screws away. Now in the secondary system, we're going to pull the shaft. To do that, we're going to loosen this Allen screw. This holds the spring tension in place. I'm going to unhook the spring from the rod so we can slide the shaft out. Now we're going to get the secondary cam. That's the cam that lifts the hanger. A lot of these are cracked, broken, worn. Discard that, throw it away. And we're going to pull the spring tension adjuster out. Put that in the cleaner. We're going to pull the spring out, and we're going to throw that away. Yeah, we know a lot of people don't go this deep. They don't want to replace these parts. They just want to put a rebuild kit in. This spring's 50 years old, 40 years old, depending on the year of the Quadrajet. We replace them every time. There's no sense in reusing a spring. Springs lose tension over time and heat. Secondary shaft will go into the cleaner, and the air horn is now ready to go into the cleaner as well. So that's a complete disassembly of the Quadrajet getting ready to go into the cleaning solution. We soak for at least 24 hours in a degreasing soak. Then we'll put it into our ultrasonic with a degreaser in there. So they'll go through an ultrasonic cleaning process after the soak. After that's done, in a non-plated carburetor, we'll go through all the external parts, hard parts will go through a tumbling system, so they'll polish. It'll clean them, make them look as nice as we can. We'll put them in a rust solution if the parts are rusty. Otherwise, we'll polish them, make them look as good as they can for a non-plated carburetor. But all the parts that are taken off are going to be cleaned and then put back together, so we can keep all the original parts, main parts of the carburetor together. So there you go, quadrajetpower.com. All the parts, kits, everything else that you need, carburetors, services. Glad to help in any way. Thanks for watching.